Hi everyone, I'm thriller author j.f.Penn and today I'm here with Jen Blood. Welcome, Jen.
Hi there. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. So just as a little introduction, Jen is the best-selling and award-winning author of the Erin Solomon mysteries, which we're going to talk about today. So Jen, tell us a bit more about you and how you got started with your writing.
Sure. Basically, I started writing when I was 4 or 5, really. Basically, that's pretty much been what I've wanted to do from the time I was a kid. And pursued it through high school and then did my undergraduate work in creative writing and then got a graduate degree in writing specifically focused on popular fiction and have done other things along the way, a lot of like side jobs and ran an animal rescue and traveled a little bit and but really writing has been kind of the lifelong goal and passion from the time I was a kid. So that's me.
Wow, so that sounds fantastic. You're a very determined lady. So tell us a bit more about Erin Solomon. Who is Erin Solomon?
Erin Solomon, such a good question. So Erin Solomon is the main character in my books, and she's an investigative journalist, and she's sort of the driving force. She co-stars in the series with Daniel Diggins, who is also known as Diggs, and he is the other star of the series. So it kind of there's a romantic leaning that starts as kind of a romantic triangle, and but basically, Erin was raised in a she was raised in a religious community for the first 9 years of her life on an island on the coast of Maine. And then her mom took her away from the island when she was 9. And a year later, there was what appeared to be a cult suicide. And so her father was the only survivor of that cult suicide. So basically, so all of this happens by the time she's 10 years old, and that really kind of defines the character. So for the rest of her life, she's really kind of everything goes back for her to that event and to trying to figure out exactly what happened. And so when she's 15, she starts working for a newspaper that this Daniel Diggs is already a reporter at, and he's kind of her mentor for a few years there, and so they get to know each other. And so those two things sort of coalesce. So she has the cult suicide, and then she has the reporting thing, and so the two of them merge, and that's really kind of where what the series revolves around.
So they kind of solve different things along the way, don't they? What are some of the big things that happen in or some of the mysteries in the books?
Sure. Well, basically, it starts out. The first one is goes back to that cult suicide. So the first one revolves around that and trying to figure out what happened, and it kind of it peels back some layers revolving around other things having to do with the cult suicide and specifically Erin's father. So, like for the second novel, it they travel up to northern Maine where there's been a serial killer who's been killing young girls for like 40 years, and so they kind of go back to that and try to figure out obviously who did it. There's someone who is imprisoned at that point who claims that he didn't do what he's been charged with, and so so that's one of them, and they end up in the woods of northern Maine with a lunatic after them. It's great. So yeah, and then the third one is kind of follows like an apocalyptic scenario with a Pentecostal church in Kentucky, so in the South. So yeah, a lot of them definitely have religious themes or religious overtones of some kind, which kind of goes along with the stuff that you write.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated with that stuff, and so a lot of times I'll come back to that and really kind of focus on that that aspect of things. And because it defines so much of Erin's character, then that really kind of makes sense for the whole series.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because that's obviously why I wanted to talk to you, because I have this fascination with religion and things as well. So
Yeah.
yeah. So what is it for you that fascinates you about cults and Pentecostal churches and
Yeah.
stuff like that? Is it something in your background, or what is it?
Well, it started out when I was young. My mom went to it's the Assembly of God Church, which is a Pentecostal church around here, and it was it's a very it's a really physical church.
Yeah.
It's very like yeah, exactly. It's very much that, and so kind of so as a kid, sort of being in the midst of this where people are speaking in tongues and they're like rolling on the floor in the aisles and all of that, it's scary and it's fascinating, and it's like this um because grown-ups are usually in control, and that's like a setting where they just aren't, and so it's a really unusual sort of thing to watch when you're a kid and you don't really know how to process it. And so I think that really sort of started me thinking about that stuff. And then I think I just always have been drawn to kind of darker things, or I've always had a strong fascination for the paranormal and things that we don't really understand, just because there's so much about the world that we do understand that I find it really refreshing that there are still mysteries out there. And so I've always been kind of drawn to that. And yeah, so I think that's the sort of the combination of the two is really kind of where it took off for me.
Yeah. And how about your, obviously not if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, but in terms of a personal faith, because I feel in my books that a lot of my quest with Morgan is finding out what I believe, and I don't necessarily know what I believe.
Yeah.
I'm not a Christian, and I write a lot of stuff. So how do your personal beliefs weave into the books, and how do you walk the line between respect of other people's faiths and writing?
Right. I think that for me, it really is because I have a fairly good idea of what I believe at this point, and it's certainly not a traditional like Christian model by any means. Um, so for me, it really has been something where my characters, I try, I try to think of my characters as organically as possible. So they're people who are just like I'm a person who's shaped by my experiences. They're people, even if they're fictional people, who are shaped by their experiences. So, for example, Diggs is a hardcore atheist. He's just that's his thing. And Erin is more, she's an agnostic, and she's kind of trying to figure out exactly how her early experiences kind of gel with where she is now. And so I feel like at this point it really is kind of separate. I try, because I do believe that religion is such a personal thing for people. I feel very strongly that people need to sort out their own spirituality and figure out where they come from and um, how that informs their life, basically. And so I want readers to be able to do the same thing where they don't feel like my beliefs are being forced on them. And Erin and Diggs at the same time have their beliefs, and there's no judgment or forcing of their views on other people. So,
Mm.
yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
If,
it is a difficult line to walk, and I struggle
hmm
all the time, with
yeah,
and also wanting to respect everyone's beliefs. But of course, you
hmm
can't. It's very
yeah,
difficult because everyone is has different things. But you have it doubly worse, I think, because you're in America, and
yeah,
I mean the my 1-star reviews are generally from religious Americans.
yes.
Do you get any kind of nasty emails or reviews, or how does that work?
I've been really surprised. I've been, and I think that I actually have consistently been surprised because I consider myself a fairly liberal kind of person. I'm liberal. Yeah, I'm definitely very liberal, and so I'm often surprised when people who are I have not a ton, but I definitely have conservative Christians who really enjoy the book,
Hmm.
and I'm very grateful, and I love that they find something in there, and I'm really very pleased that I've been able to do this to the point where my views apparently haven't colored things to the point where they're like, well, I'm not reading because she's clearly a hippie, but so but yeah, I do occasionally get feedback from people, and it's usually language.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's amazing
fair.
how I think I ritually slaughtered a child and then had sex in on a corpse, and then I get an email that says she said the F word.
I know. I'm always amazed by that. I really, I apparently, we live in a different world apparently because I'm always stunned that people even notice that that's used. And it really, from the time that I wrote the first book, I've really that's one of the final things that I do when I'm editing is I go through and I search for the number of times that I've used the F word, and I did, and I limit myself to like 4. And
I limit myself to sort of one.
oh, okay. Well, I
Yeah,
feel like Diggs would not be happy with just one. He wouldn't be able to handle it.
yeah. No, that's a good. Well, I even found myself because I found myself censoring damn, which damn really isn't a swear word, but I get comments about damn. But there's an interesting thing there. Self censorship. Because my last book, Desecration, was very dark, and I wrote a lot of really kind of dark things, and from my dark self, and
Right.
I did have to come up against, should I really write this? Do you ever feel like that, like self censoring?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. The one that I'm working on right now is because a lot of my stuff, as you do, I often will go back to real events and different things that have actually happened in history. And right now, one of the things that I'm writing about is Joseph Kony and the LRA and everything that especially in the late '80s and the '90s and the first part of 2000s, that was a really big thing. The kidnappings and the ritual killings and the things that were happening in Africa with him, and so it's definitely like working on that right now. That's really the things that they did with children, especially, is pretty dark.
Hmm.
And so trying to figure out whether, number one, whether I can bring weight um, to that and write it credibly in a way that does justice to the victims and everything, while at the same time fictionalizing it because it is a fictional story that I want to be, interesting and well paced for my readers. And I also, I question how dark I can go
Hmm.
with all of this. So yeah, I think, and especially I think as independent authors, where we don't have a publisher, sort of big brother, standing over us saying, okay, there's a line, and you've crossed it. We have to make that decision and decide, okay, where exactly is that line?
Mm. But I think, isn't it? It really is the writer's responsibility to think about and process things that other people
Mm-hmm.
won't go anywhere near, and then try and almost repackage it into a story that makes people think, I guess. So my
Hmm.
question off the back of that is, what are the themes and what are the themes that you're hiding behind your story that you want people to think about?
Mm. That's a really good question. And I think for me, it always comes back to, and I'm really surprised by this because I never really realized how, I've always, I've always thought that in terms of like violence and stuff like that, I didn't really think about it. It was just something that, especially when you're telling a story, it's just, it's part of it. I write action and mystery, and there's violence in there. But I really try to create characters who are, as I mentioned it before, are organic. They're not static characters. They're impacted by the things that happen around them. And so basically, I think that I always come back to the fact that this violence that happens and the events that happen don't happen in a vacuum, even when they're on this thing. So I definitely don't think I preach that sort of thing. But as an example, in the second book, Diggs and Erin are they're taken captive, and it's a really dark, terrifying scenario for the better half of the. I think the second half of the book is basically them running from this person, and it's really dark and it's violent and physical harm happens, and so I got a lot of flack when I was writing that about, or after when I was finished and people were reading it, about how abrasive they thought Erin was and how she was just really pushy and so
Hmm.
wanted her way in the whole thing, and she kind of bullied Diggs around and all of this stuff. And to me, that's her character. That's just, that's. But in the third book, she all of the events that happened in that second book really kind of come to light. And yeah, I mean, I think that it just basically, to me, all of these different things that happen to these characters thematically come back to evolution and finding ourselves and figuring out exactly where we stand in a world where there is violence and questions about religion and questions about who we are and where we are going. And
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's always more about the organics of the character.
Hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, you mentioned there about what people were saying about Erin, and my character Morgan Sierra, is a ex-Israeli military kick-ass, Krav Maga,
Mm-hmm.
she
Yeah.
she. And one of the struggles, and I kind of wanted a bit of James Bond, so she, does have casual sex in book three, and and then walks away, and
Well done.
and and I also, she fights and everything, and sometimes she fights instead of the guy. And I'm wondering about, the strong female protagonist. Is it that? I mean, certainly for me, it's kind of my alter ego. If I was having adventures, I'd be her. How much is Erin partly you?
I think I was talking to somebody the other day about this, and I think that for writers, it always seems to be that the characters are one part who we actually are, and then the other part is who we wish we were. And that for me is definitely Erin. And when I first started, I didn't see that. Like my friends were always, when they were reading it, they were like, "Okay, well, Erin is clearly you." And it's like, she's so much ballsier than I am, and she says this stuff, and so that's the part that I wish I had. I certainly, like, I avoid confrontation, and I try to be I try not to make waves and that stuff. And Erin doesn't care about any of that stuff. Um, But I think like my sense of humor and certainly I think the way that she sort of relates to people and she has a strong love of pop culture, which I also have and sort of bring to the table. So I do. I think that it really is. It's that combination of who we are and then who the characteristics that we wish we had. So it's sort of our idealized, at least for me, I think it's sort of my idealized self.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And I wanted to ask you about Maine because you have a lot of Maine, and you have a magazine called The Trib: Mystery, Mayhem, and Maine. And I
Yeah.
wondered what is it about Maine that makes it such a great setting for books?
Well, well, I think I was thinking about that, and I think it basically, well, like Stephen King is from here, and most of the stuff that he writes is set in Maine, and I think it's sort of the combination of like it's really beautiful here for one thing. It's a gorgeous, it's just a gorgeous setting, but it also is still really rooted in sort of working class. There's like I live in a fishing town, and so fishing is still kind of a big part of the commerce and the way that people make a living. And it's like the state that's really like it's kind of a throwback. And so people are real characters. Like I went out to dinner last night with a guy who it's just this older guy who grew up around here, and he loves his wife is really into the books, and so we were talking, and he actually grew up in the town that my main town is based on. And so he's talking about some of these characters that he grew up with, and all these crazy stories about like running around town on a tractor with all of his buddies, and yeah, I mean it's just kind of a throwback that I feel like is a nice vibe to kind of lend atmosphere, basically.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And just off the back of that, I guess, because Maine is easy for you to research because you're there. But
Well, yeah.
in terms of researching your cults and your nasty things, how do you do your research? Do you do a lot of trips, or what do you do?
I don't do as many trips yet. And so basically, so that's certainly an advantage to writing about Maine. And then the last book took place, part of it was in Mexico, but I've been there enough so that I could, I think, write that authentically. Um, and then in terms of like the cults and all of that stuff, it really is just, I do a lot of interviews. So I do interviews as often as I can with people, and then I do a lot of reading. So I'll go to the library or I'll look stuff up online, and yeah. So that's basically that's kind of the meat of it. But I do think I love researching. That's one of my favorite parts
Me
of being
too.
a writer. Oh, it's so fun because you get yeah. I just because I'm so fascinated by all of these horrible things. And so I feel like it sort of legitimizes it if I can say, well, I'm a writer. So
Yeah.
I have to step into this stuff. It's okay.
I'm going to have to introduce you to a guy I've never met in Canada, who's a coroner, and he's an ex-homicide detective. And it's great having friends who are interested in weird stuff, because he's always sending me emails of like, you should check out this article, and it's some kind of horrible murder with
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
or some kind of new way that bodies decompose.
Yeah, no, but that's really helpful.
It is.
That, yeah, yeah.
It's
No,
so
it's,
funny.
yeah, and I mean, and because I'm a fairly shy person, and this is a great way to, if I can talk about work, then I'm okay with interacting with people. It's so much easier. And so this is a great way to have met really amazing people and to sort of make those connections that I never in a million years would make otherwise.
Yeah.
So
No, fantastic. And then I've got to ask you about your name.
okay. It's real. It
Well,
really is.
well, amusingly, I get asked all the time because I'm Penn, and people go, "Is that a real name?" And I'm like, "Yes, it is." Do you think your name has some kind of weird impact on your life?
Reason. Um, I think. I mean, I certainly like when I was younger, blood. I was definitely made fun of, or just basic stuff when I was a kid. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think basically people always said it would be a great writer's name, but I had a distant cousin who actually wrote children's mysteries, and but her last name wasn't Blood, but she was the major influence that sort of convinced me that you could actually be a writer for a living, and but yeah, I love it now. I hated it when I was a kid.
It's funny, isn't it? It's a really funny thing, but it's kind of claiming the name and going, "Yeah."
Yeah, exactly.
That's fantastic. So tell people where they can find you and your books online.
Okay, sure. I have a website. It's jenblood.com. It's JENBLOOD.com. And that has actually all of the information about the books, and it has the information about the Trib, the magazine that you mentioned, and it has some free short stories featuring Diggs and Solomon, and a whole bunch of stuff on there. And then my books right now are available on Amazon, and they're available on Barnes and Noble. I'm in the process of getting new book covers and that stuff, and at that point I'll be expanding to Kobo and everywhere else,
Yeah,
basically.
everywhere.
So for now, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for your time, Jen. That was great.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah.